One of my favorite things in the world to do is watch Friends. I know it's been off for years and years. It's not even around, but I still find myself binge watching old episodes. And I was thinking about this today and thinking, it's the predictability of the friends in the circle, right? You have Chandler with his quirkiness, Monica with her type A of just everything has to be so neat and tidy and organized. It's Phoebe's ability to make you laugh at her silly songs. Ross always comes in with those smart comments, and Joey and him and his food, like it is just so hilarious. And of course, Rachel, she just brings everybody together, and it's just such this beautiful, cohesive team of people. And it's why I wanted to come on and share with you today that I have an opportunity for you to find your friends in the content creation space. So if you are thinking about creating your first or your next digital course, I don't want you to miss this opportunity because Amy Porterfield just opened the doors for registration for her Course Confident Bootcamp. And I'm actually offering a special bonus for anyone that registers for the Course Confident Bootcamp through my special link. So I want you to go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register. That's crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And what you're going to find when you get there is I have this special bonus private podcast series. It's called Money Mindset for Creators. So I want you to go register for Amy's bootcamp, download the podcast, and immediately start listening to it, because what this training is set up to do is to help you get your mind right about monetizing your content, making money so that you can fuel your content creation dreams. So go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register for Course Confident. And I cannot wait for you to find your friends and find the people that will be there for you. Do you see what I did there? Yeah, nice little friends segue connection. Go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And I cannot wait to see you inside. Okay, let's get into today's episode. What are the first decisions that you need to make before you start a podcast? I have been in several groups lately where people are just getting started in their online journey, and they're trying to figure out like, okay, I want to have a digital product. I know I want to have a podcast, but what does it look like to start? Do I just need to buy a microphone? Do I need to do this? Do I need to do that? Do I need a title first? Do I need to pick out my artwork? Do I need to get headshots taken? Like, where do I even begin? So instead of diving into all of the things that, we could get so geeky and technical about equipment and recording software, but actually I want to share with you the first 5 decisions that you have to make before you even buy a microphone. Because there's some of these things that will probably shock you, because I know that there's people listening. They're like, wait, Crystal, I already have a podcast. Does this apply to me? Well, yes, if you have not made any of these decisions and you've been kind of flying by the seat of your pants, then yes, this will absolutely apply to you, because what I have found is some people don't make these decisions, and you're the ones that are bumping up against pod fade. You're getting close to burnout, or you're just confused on where do I need to go with my show next? What are the next steps? So this episode is kind of for everybody. It's for someone that's thinking about starting a podcast and not really sure what to do next, but it's also for those of you that have been podcasting for a while and something isn't sitting well with you and you can't quite figure out what it is or what you could change or what you could make better. So pay attention, because we are talking about the first 5 podcast decisions you need to make before you ever even buy a microphone. So let's get right to it. Welcome to the Profit Podcast, where we teach you how to start, launch, and market your content with confidence. I'm your host, Crystal Profit, and I'm so excited that you're here. Thanks for hanging out with me today, because if you've been trying to figure out the world of content creation, this is the show that will help be your time-saving shortcut. So let's get right to it, shall we? Okay, so we have a lot to cover today. So I'm just going to dive right into these decisions because I want to make sure that we have plenty of time to cover each one of them in detail. Because while these are just 5 decisions, they're pretty important ones. And they are ones, like I said, this has nothing to do with microphone, with your budget, with what recording software you should use, and so many of the other things that people typically get wrapped around the axle, right? Like if you've never heard that expression, it's like you're so concentrated on this one piece that you don't realize once you pick your mic and once you pick your recording software, you have to know what you're doing after that. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, this is why I tell people you can literally get started with just your phone as long as you have this other stuff sorted out, because it gets easier to talk about what you want to talk about and who you want to talk to. And I'm already giving some of the things away that we're going to talk about today, but I just want to share with you that yes, sound quality is great. You need to have audio that people can listen to, but it's not everything. Your microphone is only one piece of the puzzle, and the content and the people that you are talking to are just as important. So I'm going to give you some tips in these decisions to help you make sure that you're creating something that you love. It's why people come to me and they're like, Crystal, how are you so enthusiastic? You love podcasting. Yes, I do. I love it so much. And it's literally what I talk about. I have such a meta show. I podcast about podcasting where I'm teaching podcasters, right? It's super meta on meta on meta. But I love it so much. And the reason why is because I am so clear on all of these decisions. And I love really unpacking these things because after talking to hundreds, if not thousands of podcasters and content creators, the same things keep coming up. It's why I will say, I'm your podcast therapist. Come sit in my chair, lounge in my office, and let's really dive into what's underneath the surface. It's usually one of these 5 things that people need to unpack. Not the software, not the recording, not the equipment. It is really, really tied to these 5 things. So number one, if we were to sit down, let's pretend it's me and you now, okay? We're in a coaching session and we're going to go through these 5 things. So when I ask a question, I want you to think about how this pertains to you. Because you're getting a free coaching session. Like, welcome to the show. We are here. But the first decision that you need to make is you need to know your why and set goals for your podcast. So what does that mean? This means like any other like self-improvement type of thing. It's like, what is your why? What is your purpose? Why are you doing this? What is your mission statement? That's really what I'm asking you to do. Why are you doing this? Because I'm going to coach you in a different way depending on your why. So if you come to me and you say, Crystal, I want to start a podcast because I want to share a message, well, then I'm going to give you very specific like homework assignments than I would if you were to come to me and say, Crystal, I want to make a ton of money with my podcast. Okay, well, we got to, shift the plan just slightly because you're going to concentrate on things that are a little bit different than someone who wants to have a really large reach or wants to share their message to a very specific niche audience. So you have to know your why. What is your why? My why for when I started my very first podcast was 1, I love to talk. Can we just call that out? It feels really silly, a little taboo to say, I just love to talk. I really do. It is my best form of communication for me to get a message across. It's something that I've always really enjoyed. When I can think back to little Crystal, in 3rd and 4th grade, and the teacher's like, who wants to read for class? And I'm like, boom, my hand is shooting up in the sky. Who wants to go to the front of the room and present? Boom, me, I want to do it. And it's never really been like, oh, I'm the center of attention, look at me. It was something about the rush of being in front of people and having that like out of body experience that a lot of people hate. I totally get it. Most people hate public speaking and speaking in front of crowds. I love it. It energizes me. Maybe that's because I'm an extrovert. Let's call it what it is. I am extroverted to my core, and I know so many of you are introverted. So I want to call out all of these things so that you're not doing a comparison of like, yeah, but that's, you make it seem so easy. Yeah, it is easier for me because I'm an extrovert. I don't have to work as hard at it, and I love to talk. So whenever I said, well, what can I do? I was blogging. And I was not loving it. Let's just be really honest. I always, like, when I go on other people's podcasts, I say I was a very unsuccessful blogger, and I kind of joke about it. It was not fun for me because it was hard. It was really freaking hard to sit there and write when I don't define myself as a super talented writer. So it was like a whole struggle and mindset thing. But whenever I was like, oh, I can just talk. I don't have to write. I can just talk. Are you kidding me? And then here's like funny behind the scenes. I know I've shared this before, but I was actually voice typing my blog post. Y'all, that's a podcast. I was voice typing into Google Docs my blog post, and I was like, wait a second, hang on. I'm literally just speaking these things out loud, and that's what was making it easier. And so that was kind of my aha moment of, oh, I just need to start a podcast. So these are my whys. They're not groundbreaking. I wasn't doing something totally altruistic, like I want to change the world. I was like, no, I wanted to create content. And I realized, oh, talking is easier for me than writing. So that was my first why. Today, it's completely shifted, right? I want to help creators create with confidence. That is my why today. And then when we talk about goals, my goals with this podcast is to have a very big reach. It's to be an authority in the podcast space and establish myself as someone that, like, she's trusted. We can go to her. She's going to give us really helpful stuff without saying like, oh, sure, I'll give you this, but then you got to go buy my $75,000 course, and that's the only way you can get it. We're not about that around here. My goal is to help you really have practical tools and strategies so that you can build up that confidence so that you can share your message with the world, right? I'm just like a tiny piece in the puzzle to helping other people gain their confidence. And I just totally believe in the ripple effect of podcasting and having your message help other people who also help other people who help other people. Do you see where I'm going with this? It's the ripple effect of sharing your message with the world. Fantastic. Like, this is the first place you have to start. If you have not done this, so like I said earlier, whether you're just getting started or you're a seasoned podcaster and you've never thought about this before, I want you to think about it. So this is the therapy session now, is what is your why? And what are the goals with your show? And also, these change over time. So if you are a seasoned podcaster, maybe you're in the second year of your podcast and you're like, yeah, things changed from whenever I first started this. I started this for X reason, and now I'm doing it for Y reason. Well, think about it. Do some journaling. Write it down in a Google Doc. Like, I don't care where you put this. This is for you, right? This is your therapy session that we're in here. And I want you to think about what is your why, what are your goals, and jot those down and see how it changes over time. Because like I said, mine has completely shifted and evolved from when I first started in 2018, and that's completely fine if yours does too. All right, so that's decision number one. You have to know your why and set goals. The second one,
being a woman in business comes with its own unique set of challenges, but also so many opportunities. We get ahead by leaning in to what makes us different from business as usual. I'm Samantha Hartley, host of Profitable Joyful Consulting, inviting you to a special 6-episode series exploring the experience of being a woman in business. You want to hear from women consultants who've hit $1 million, who sell 6-figure engagements, or who've broken their own revenue ceilings? Yeah, those are my clients, and they'll be sharing too. Join me for 6 must-listen episodes that tackle key challenges for women consultants.
Follow Profitable Joyful Consulting on your favorite podcast app.
this is probably the most complex and the one where people will absolutely get stuck. So hear me out. I don't want you to get stuck here. I want you to make some decisions and move on with your life. Okay? Promise me that. Like, I hope you're shaking your head and nodding and saying, Crystal, I promise. Say it with me. Crystal, I promise. Because decision number 2 is you have to choose your podcast topic, your title, and your tagline. Because these are some of your biggest key decisions. Now, don't worry, because if you're like, Crystal, I don't even know where to get started with that, or I want to change things, I have so many resources for you that I actually grabbed before I started recording this, because I was like, we've talked about so many of these things before. So I have a podcast and YouTube video for how to research and pick a podcast name and title. I also have podcast topic ideas for planning content, and then how to find your podcast niche and topic. So don't worry, okay? We're not going to get into the nitty-gritty of all of these things today because I have all the resources. We've already talked about them here before. So I'm just going to link you to all of those podcast episodes, all of those previous YouTube videos for you to go check them out. But you have to pick a podcast topic. What are you going to talk about? And I've been seeing more and more, there's a lot of people on YouTube where I'll see their comments and it says, well, I just want to talk. I just want to talk, to share my thoughts, to share my ideas. And it makes me think back to the beginning of my podcast. Remember, I told you I love to talk, but at the end of the day, my message was still very clear. The topic that I chose it was like talking about female entrepreneurship and what it was like to get started. It was called The Rookie Life. So we were all rookies. Keep it up, rookies. We all have to start somewhere. This is actually, did you know that? That was the original tagline of the show. Speaking of taglines, but that was what I got started with. And again, over time, it evolved, it changed, and now we have what the show is today, but I had to pick an initial topic. Now, if you're stuck on this and you're like, well, Crystal, I have like 7 things that I want to talk about. And I want to talk about being a mom, and I want to talk about, being a gardener, and then doing yoga. And so people will tell me this all the time. You're very, as Marie Forleo calls it, multi-passionate. I love this word so much because we're all this way. We all are multifaceted. I love to go on walks. I love hanging out with the kids, and we love watching movies. We are a movie buff family. Love watching movies. I could start a podcast about that. I could talk about journaling and creative writing. I could talk about cooking. I love baking. There's just so many different facets to who I am. But what I've narrowed down on is I want to speak to content creators and podcasters specifically on creating content with confidence. Do you see how specific that is? It is very specific. I'm not talking to all creators. I'm talking to people that are looking for tools and strategies to help them create with confidence and be able to do it in a way that feels good for them. And so I want you to be that specific with your topic. And if you have something where you're like, I just cannot make this decision, okay, then zoom out a little bit and say, what is the umbrella topic that connects all of this together? So I use the term umbrella topic in profit podcasting. And what that means is, what is the thing at the top of the food chain that connects all of your other topics underneath it? So if you wanted to talk about health and fitness, so I will tell people, go to Apple Podcast and look at all the categories, because that's what you're going to have to do. You're going to have to find a category for your show to fit under. So start there. If you just cannot decide which topic should I go, fit under, what should I do? Go to the categories in Apple Podcast, scroll down and look at all the different ones. And then that will help you narrow down what your umbrella topic should be, because you can't choose other. There's not an other button or miscellaneous. You have to pick one of these categories in order to get listed in Apple Podcasts. So pick one. Pick one of those and let that be your deciding factor. You can always change this. I changed mine. I was under business entrepreneurship, I think, in the beginning, and then business marketing. You can pick up to 3 in Buzzsprout. And then I changed it to education how to, and that's where we are today. That's where the show lives because it is educational. I'm always teaching, I'm sharing how to, and that's where we are. So if you're stuck on your topic, go to Apple Podcast, figure out which category you need to be in. And again, you can always change it. Now, when it comes to the title and the tagline, like I said, I'm not going to go into detail on this one because it's one that, there's no magic formula for it. And I don't want you to get stuck on it, but I do have some resources to help you research and pick a podcast name and title. So go check out that episode, go watch that YouTube video, and it will absolutely be helpful. And when it comes to your tagline, this is just something that isn't required, but I think that it's helpful to solidify more branding for who you want to be to your listeners. Because for me, I will have people they quote me on social media, which I think is so fun. I started guesting on more podcasts, and it was shout out to Kristen. She has the Build Your Own Fairy Tale podcast. And she did a quotable on Instagram, and it said, "Keep it up. We all have to start somewhere." This is my tagline of this show. And people will only know that because I say it over. And I've said it thousands of times at this point, y'all. It is crazy how many times I've said it. I'm usually saying it to myself because I need that coaching too. But that's the power of a tagline. If you were to hear that somewhere else, somebody would say, "Oh, Crystal says that on her podcast. That's where I've heard that before." So taglines are super powerful as well. If you don't have one, like I said, it's not a requirement, but I do want you to consider what could you say in every single episode of your content. It doesn't just have to be your podcast. It could be your YouTube, your live streams. I do webinars, and I always also do that. I will guest on other people's podcasts, and I also say my tagline. So it's just another form of branding and getting your message out there. Okay, so are you still with me? Are we good here? Okay, we covered decision number 1 and decision number 2. Now we're moving on to decision number 3, which is deciding on your ideal listener. Who are you speaking to? Who is that perfect person that should listen to your podcast? And I want to give you an example. So Sonia, I don't know if you're listening. Shout out to Sonia. She is someone that I recently met. There was this incredible event for PodFest and Pod Houston here in the Houston area. And I was on this panel, like so much fun. So much. I cannot wait to do more panels and more events like that local here in Houston because it was fantastic to connect with podcasters in real life again. And it made my night. It was so much fun. But Sonia was saying she had a question. We had a Q&A at the end for the panel. She raised her hand and she said, "I'm going to this event and it's for parents of high school students getting ready for college." So it was like college readiness, college prep type stuff. I'm totally into this right now because we have a high schooler officially. He's a freshman, but officially these are things that are on my radar. And she was saying, how do I get people to listen? Like, how do I capitalize on being at this event and having people subscribe to my show? Do I need a QR code? Do I need this, do that? So I love that she was thinking about the practical marketing topics, like do I need this? Do I need that? Should I have, business cards, whatever? But at the end of the day, my advice to her was when you're sitting there talking to these people, let them know how much you know what they're struggling with. Because if you just say, "Oh yeah, I'm Sonia, I have a podcast, you should listen to it," it's not super convincing, right? It's not very convincing because I'm like, what is your podcast about? Like, what do you do? Of course, everybody's here for college readiness. But I told her, I said, what you should do is you just say, "Yeah, is the PSAT like really confusing for you? Or are you not sure when you should start applying for colleges or writing essays for your junior or senior? Or are you just trying to understand the entire college admissions process?" She was like, "Oh yeah, these are totally questions that they're into." And I thought it's because I know who her ideal listener is based on her topic. So again, this goes back to the topic that we were just talking about. You have to have something very specific because I'm here talking to you about Sonia's podcast. I'm letting you know that this is exactly what her show is about. This is who her ideal listener is because I am her ideal listener. I want to know these things. I want like, when am I supposed to start doing this? Like, what things can my son do to prepare for admissions and, GPA stuff and what all the things that you got to get together. Like, I don't know any, I've been out of high school forever. I don't know any of these things anymore. Everything has changed so much, but I know I need help with these things. So I am her ideal listener. So when it comes to finding the people that are right for your show, it's really hard to, or it's not hard, it's actually easy to get stuck in this like marketing box. Like, I'm sure you've seen these market surveys where it's like, okay, your gender is this and your income is this and you're married or single or divorced and you have, this much education and you're this and you have blue eyes and blonde hair and like all these like ICA things, right? Have you heard this? The ideal customer avatar. I think these are great exercises, but also it only gets you so far. You've got to know who your listener is. Like, I know so many of this, like, and it doesn't apply to 100% of my audience, right? I know that there is a sliding scale of how much of what I say relates to my audience, but there's a big portion of you. If I were to say something about Central Park, you're like, oh, she's talking about Friends, because I know that y'all watch Friends. I know this because you've been with me since 2018, a lot of you, and you've told me I love it when you show your Central Park cup or you wear your Friends t-shirt, or like, you let me know these things because we are engaging. But if you are just getting started and you don't know these things about your audience, that's okay. It's fine to make some assumptions about who your audience is. They will tell you. I remember Kathy, she's one of my students so shout out Kathy. We're giving all the shout outs today. But Kathy, when she first started her podcast, it was called the Caregiver Wife Cup. Did I get that wrong, Kathy? It had the word wife in it. And she was given the feedback, not everyone in your audience is a wife. Like, I'm a caregiver, but I'm taking care of a sibling. I'm taking care of a parent. So yes, I am a caregiver, but I'm not necessarily in the wife role. And so once she figured that out about her listener, she went back and changed her title. She slightly tweaked her topic because that was so important to understanding who her ideal listener was. So today, Kathy's podcast is called The Caregiver Cup. So that is the name of her show. It is very clear, and I actually love this because it's very succinct. And Kathy, I love your picture of, you sipping on your coffee or your tea, and it's very inviting, and it's a beautiful place for people to go and get advice, get care, get resources, and understand what it's like to be a caregiver if someone unexpectedly finds himself in that situation and they're looking for resources. I know to tell them. I know who Kathy's ideal listener is. We've talked, we've coached together, we've had many conversations, so I can tell if somebody is in that position and all of a sudden they're a caregiver, I'm going to say, go listen to Kathy's podcast. So all of a sudden I'm a marketer for her show because she is so clear on her topic, her title, and her ideal listener. Can you see why these decisions are so important? It makes marketing so much easier, not just for you, the host, but for other people to be able to say, oh, you want to start a podcast? Go listen to Crystal's show. She has this incredible show where she shares this and that. Like, it makes things so much easier. So I do have some resources for understanding your listeners and how to really understand like serving them better. So I'm going to link to those in the show notes as well, but we need to move on because we still have 2 more decisions. Oh my gosh, we're blowing through these. I feel like really fast and we're already like so far into this, but understanding your ideal listener, deciding on who that is was number 3. The 4th one, how to plan your first 20 episodes. Now, this is something that I feel like I'm giving this away and I shouldn't. Okay, I'm going to throw this out there. People listening that are students of mine from Profit Podcasting are like, I cannot believe that she is giving this away because of all the lessons, all the lessons I teach inside my program, this has to be the one that's prevented the most podcast burnout or pod fade, whatever you want to call it. And the reason why it's so freaking important is because you can have a running list of decent ideas. They don't even have to be great ideas. They're just decent ideas for your content, and you're not left wondering, what do I talk about next? So this is when I ask people, they're like, I think I'm going to quit my show, or maybe they stop their show because I will meet some ashamed podcasters. I will, when they introduce themselves, it's like the kid that stole the candy and their tongue is blue, but they're trying to tell me, oh no, I didn't take any of that candy, and they're guilty and they're shameful, and they like blurt it out of their mouth when I say, I'm a podcast coach, and they're like, oh, well, I quit my podcast. No, I didn't really quit. We stopped like a few months ago, but I'm going to get back to it, and I'm just taking a break. It was a lot. And when I really dig into the details of why they stopped their podcast, it was because they just didn't know what to talk about next. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like I want to scream. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, this is my superpower of giving you brainstorming ideas and helping you plan lots of content. I remember Brittany. So Brittany has been with us for a super long time. She has a podcast called Post for Success. And I remember when she started, this would have been in 2020. Actually, I think she started in 2019. And then in 2020 is when she rebranded it. And I just remember we were talking about what she did for an entire year of her podcast. So she's a previous student, and she sat down and she said, Crystal, I was in the airport and I was traveling, and I was listening to your lesson about planning your first 20 ideas. And I sat down, I did all the brainstorming exercises, and then all of a sudden I had a year's worth of content in less than an hour. And I was like, that is incredible. So if you podcast once a week for a whole year, that's essentially 52 ideas. That's all you need for an entire year. And I hope everybody just kind of breathed a sigh of relief, because that's all you need for an entire year of a podcast is 52 ideas. And some of you were saying, that's all? What do you mean, Crystal? You're saying that's all. That's a lot. That is a lot of podcast ideas. But it's really not. Because if you can come up with 20, that's why I'm not telling you to do 52. I'm just laying out, this is what 12 months of podcasting, that would be 52. If you could do 20 ideas, especially if you're just getting started, that gets you through probably the hardest parts of being a podcaster is the first 3 months. If you ask people, I know there's many of you nodding right now saying, yep, it really is. Launching a podcast is not an easy feat. And then once you launch it, you realize, oh, I got to keep creating this stuff. It wasn't about just putting it out there. I got to stay consistent and keep putting more stuff out there. And I don't really know what I'm doing. And I'm trying to get better at editing. And I'm like, do I put guests on the show? Do I do this? There's a lot of decisions, a lot of emotional things happening in the first 3 months of your podcast, which is why I don't want it to be, what do I talk about next? I want you to have 20 ideas for exactly what you're going to talk about on your show. Now, do these have to be the final ones that you use? Absolutely not. No. The idea is to get the juices flowing where you're creatively like, oh, I could talk about this, and I get asked about this a lot, and I know that I could even do blah, 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 blah. And people, you will be so surprised once you sit down to start brainstorming 20 ideas, like the ball starts rolling, and it's almost like the floodgates come out, and all of a sudden you will look down and say, oh my gosh, I have so many more ideas than I thought. Like, this one can actually be broken up into 3 different episodes. It doesn't all have to be in one. So planning your first 20 episodes are so important. And if you're already into your podcast, you're a seasoned podcaster, I want you to plan your next 20 episodes. This should be your focus. So if you were to sit down and do that, what would it look like? Would it look like going back through your most popular episodes that you've had in the last 6 months? Would it be digging through your emails and seeing what are those replies you've been getting back from people? What are those questions? If you have a Facebook group, digging through the questions that you see come up over and over again, going on your Instagram and seeing what are the things that are really resonating. Like go through your reels and see, oh, people really love this thing. I need to talk about it. It's a hot topic in the industry. Let's cover it on the podcast. What are 4 other ideas that I can spin off from that? I know that creating ideas, it's a superpower of mine. I literally have a freebie called 500 plus podcast ideas for any industry. We'll link to that in the show notes too, because if you're brand new to the community and you don't have that one, you need that one, because that one alone, I told you, you need 20 ideas. There's 500 plus. There are so many ideas in that you can dig through and find a few things. At the very least, you're going to come up with some other ideas. You're going to say, oh, Crystal's ideas are terrible. I would do this instead. That's great. I don't care. I just want you to have your next 20 ideas. That is your assignment after today's episode, is plan your next 20 ideas. But that is decision number 4 that you need to make. Remember, we haven't even bought a microphone. We haven't even decided on your equipment. If you're just getting started, we are just planning and deciding all of these things. But this brings us to decision number 5. And I love this one so much, because if you've been around here, you'll often hear me say there are no rules to podcasting. There's not. If somebody says that there are, please run the other direction, okay? Because there are no rules. There's some guidelines, and there's some things that you should probably do that'll help you have a more successful, you should be consistent. You should show up when you say you're going to show up, and you should keep creating valuable content for your audience. But outside of that, there's not really any rules, which makes decision number 5 both really awesome and kind of crappy. And I'll explain why. So decision number 5 is deciding on the critical components of formatting your podcast episodes. So what does this mean? This means you have your solo episodes or interviews. You have live streams or pre-recorded content, or maybe you have repurposed or dedicated content for your podcast audience. Or what about your intro, your outro? How long will your episodes be? Are you going to have music? Are you going to have the format for every single episode? Or are you going to change it up from time to time? This is what I mean by the format of your show. Like, what is it going to be? And will it change all the time? Will it be exactly 42 minutes and 50 seconds? Will it be exactly 5 minutes or less? Like, what will the cadence of your show be? Is it every Tuesday and Thursday? Is it every other Wednesday? What does that look like? So there are critical decisions that you have to make. And this is another piece where, again, I love and hate this decision, because once you decide these things, they're not set in stone. They're not, because there's no rules. Do I need to say it again? There are no rules in podcasting. So if you have literally for every single episode, you've had 200 episodes up to this, like right now, today, and they've all been interviews. If you decide tomorrow, I'm going to do a solo episode, go for it. Who's stopping you? You can absolutely do that. But if you are just getting started and you don't know which way is up, you're like, I don't know which way to go. Do I do solo? Do I do interview? Do I do both? Should I do it from here? Do I do this? I don't care what you do. You have to decide. So that's why it's like this beautiful love-hate relationship, because you are the one that makes these decisions. And guess what? You can change them at any time. Again, this is so beautiful. Like, I have the biggest smile on my face right now, because I love that, yes, you're deciding on these things, but you're also not making these decisions in perpetuity, and you can never, ever, ever change them. You're deciding on what you need right now, but these are decisions that you need to make. So you need to make a decision. It's yes or no. It's up or down. It's left or right. But you got to make a decision for every single episode. And I've thought about this before. I've my content calendar has gone through multiple iterations of super simple. And today it's a lot more complex than it used to be. And I actually thought about having a drop-down menu for every single one of these components. Is this solo? Is this interview? How long is it? Is it repurposed? Does it have the same intro? Does it have the outro? Like dynamic content? It's this length. It's this, it's that. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that is, first of all, I felt like that's bonkers. I felt like I would be like, okay, you're getting a little too neurotic here with the content calendar, Crystal. You need to slow down a little bit. But these are decisions. I make these decisions every single time. It's just not a conscious decision now because I've been doing this for so long. But if you're brand new to this and you need that type of guidance, write it out in when you're doing your notes, you're planning your episodes, you're doing bullet points or you're doing a full-blown script, whatever, write it out, write it at the top, right? Okay, today it's going to be solo. It's going to be, strictly for this podcast audience. It's going to be audio only, no video whatsoever. It's going to be 12 minutes and I'm going to stop recording at 12 minutes. I have to talk to that 12-minute mark and then that's it. I'm going to turn it off. These are the decisions of formatting an episode, but you have to make them. You have to make them. And this is something that, again, I teach all of this inside my program, Profit Podcasting. And these are some of the lessons that people tell me that they're so helpful because making these decisions well before you ever invest in your microphone equipment, you ever invest in streaming software or recording software or video software, whatever other things that you have to buy for your podcast, if you know these things, you're going to feel so much more confident. You're going to feel so much more prepared. You are going to feel like a freaking rock star behind the microphone because you've already made these decisions before you ever start recording. So if you found today helpful, all the decisions, again, let me run through them again real fast. So number 1, know your why and set your goals. Number 2, choose your podcast topic, title, and tagline. Number 3, decide on your ideal listener. Number 4, plan your first or next 20 episodes. And number 5, the critical components of formatting your podcast episodes. If you found all of this helpful today, then I really want you to join me in my upcoming free training. It is happening on October 24th and October 26th, 2023. So if you're listening to this in the future, likely it has passed and you can't join anymore, but I want you to go check it out because I just created a brand new masterclass and it's called How to Get Your First or Next 1,000 Downloads. Because I've heard y'all loud and clear, you want the components of starting a podcast, but also you want to get those downloads. You want to make sure that what you're creating is having an impact and you're making a difference from the beginning. I want you to join us in this training so that you can learn the things that I've taught to hundreds, if not thousands of podcasters in all the capacities that I have been creating content since I started teaching all of this in 2018. I want you to have the solid foundation and the frameworks that we've been using to help us get this podcast to a top 1.5% show. And I want to show you how to get your first or next 1,000 podcast downloads. So go to crystalprofit.com/1000, the number 1000 dash downloads. 1,000 dash downloads. And I'm going to have links to it in the show notes, but I want you to register. Again, it's October 24th and October 26th. We're going to have 2 trainings. They're going to be afternoon trainings. So after you get off work, after you've done all the things, come hang out with us. These are going to be at 5 p.m. Central. And they're going to be so much fun. So much fun. I love a live training. I haven't done very many this year. So I'm showing up. I'm doing all the Q&As afterwards. I'm going to help you answer your specific podcast questions. So again, go to crystalprofit.com/1000 dash downloads, and I will see you there. And we will have so much fun. But that's all I have for you today. So make sure you are subscribed or following the podcast wherever you are listening. And as always, remember, keep it up. We all have to start somewhere. Hey, Profit Podcast listeners. Thanks for sticking around to a little bit after the episode to hear this special message because I want to hear from you. We are starting a new segment called Fan Mail Shoutouts, and I want to hear from you and I want to hear your questions. What do you want to know? What questions have you been dying to ask me? So here's how to make this happen. Go to the app where you're listening to this podcast right now. Go there. I'll wait a second. Okay. Now, once you're there, you're going to see a hyperlink at the top of the episode description that says, send Crystal a text message. And that's all I want you to do. Send me a text. It could be casual, informal. It could be totally anonymous. Or if you want, you can include your name and the name of your podcast or content wherever you are creating, and I will give you a special shout out in an upcoming episode. So again, go to the show notes for where you're listening to this episode right now, and it will say, send Crystal a text message. And I cannot wait to hear from you and give you a shout out in an upcoming segment of Fan Mail Shoutouts.